Been a long minute. Back again. Thanks for waiting. Weird Wild Willie here with some amazing ideas. So I'm glad that you stuck around and waited. This is probably going to be the best video I've ever made. So if you don't watch any of them before, watch this one. All right, let's get into it. What are soul ties, how they work, and how to get rid of them. Okay. Now, this is a relatively new concept or a new topic. You know, I haven't even heard about it until a year ago. But I've seen tons of videos since I heard about it about a year ago on the internet. And I tell you what, since it's new, all of them are all wrong and they're incomplete. And I tell you what, they don't know what they're talking about. I tried some of the methods, none of them work. It doesn't make any sense, right? So Weird Wild Willie's here to help you getting straightened out on this. The soul tie. Okay, so first thing we got to understand is we got to know what it actually is so we understand how to fix it, okay? So your sexual energy, I rehearsed this like 5 hours ago. I'm pretty wiped out. But anyways, okay, what is a soul tie? When you have sex with somebody, basically you create a soul tie. That's what that is. The concept is such that, you know, there's two people. These are our two little people. They have sex, right? I cut my strings too short, so they're not going to work. So a knot is tied through the act of sex, and then, one person, right? That's the idea, okay? This is so because your sexual energy center, that's like the first chakra, right, you got. So if you think about the chakras as a triangle with, 6 lines in them, demarcating 7 areas, sex energy is the bottom. That's the base, man. We came from the act of sex. Sex is like our bestowed God power. Like it drives our physiology. The human experience is largely based upon sex, okay? So when you have sex with a person, there's a huge amount of energy that is generated within you and within the other person and then exchanged, okay? So you're really activating the sex energy chakra of your body. And that energy has to go somewhere. So when you have sex with a person, it goes into the soul tie, right? That's the concept. Okay, so this is the first thing we have to dispel about the soul tie, right? Say you have 30 different partners over your history. You think, I've tied 30 different knots with 30 different people. That's a misconception. There's only 2 different types of soul ties, okay? There's only 2 different types of soul ties. And once I explain that in just a minute here, it will make sense. But I want to say the second thing, they compound. They compound, and the one type of soul tie negatively affects the other type of soul tie. So let me explain this. I had to write it out. Okay, so when sex happens, there's a huge amount of energy generated and exchanged. And that type of sexual energy generated is based on the intention behind the act. Okay, there's only 2 types of intention. Okay, the intention can only be one of 2 forms, hence 2 types of soul ties. The intention can be commitment, okay, or it can be exploitative intention. So hence you can have a commitment-based soul tie, or you can have an exploitative-based soul tie. So those are the 2 types of soul ties. So if you have 30 sex partners in your history, 25 of them were whatever, Tinder hookups, one-night stands, barfly, whatever, and then 5 of them were genuine relationship attempts. Those 25, the energy generated from those 25 hookups was exploitative energy that gets carried over into each one of your genuine committed relationship attempts, and it works to undermine the relationship ultimately. All right, so, okay, let me just think here. All right, let's get into it. So we're going to start out with our examples to illustrate this. So you're in high school, okay? You're in high school, you're your little string, you meet your friend, okay, your soulmate, girlfriend, boyfriend, you guys date a long time. you're innocent, you haven't been abused or adulterated, right? You guys decide you're going to have sex. There's an intention of commitment because you're young and you love each other. And then, right, you tie the knot. And boom, you've created the soul tie, right? That's kind of the basic concept, okay? But being young, being naive, not really developed, what happens is the relationship ends, okay? So, but each person has a knot in them because they generated that energy, that sexual energy, they imprinted it on each other and had to go somewhere. Okay, the relationship is ended. There's no soul tie anymore. I mean, that's it. There's a knot. Okay, that's kind of how it works. So, in the undeveloped adolescent male brain, I can speak about that. When you have sex for the first time as a kid or whatever, and you're undeveloped, like teenagers realize that sex is a serious act, and they're innocent. So, when they do it, they know it means something, right? But if one of the kids isn't developed, he's not ready to move on. One of the people is, the other person isn't. The relationship's going to end. But they had sex. They're no longer a straight pure energy being, right? Because this is energetics, right? And this is like so relevant to healing. This is probably the most relevant thing to energetic healing, is looking at this stuff, the soul tie, and understanding it completely, right? So he's got his knot. So he goes on and he says, man, I had sex. That was amazing. Life is about sex. I'm going to see if I can have sex with another person. I'm going to see what this type of person feels like, or that type of person, or what this experience is like, or how many people I can have. And it's probably can be the same for a lot of women, It's like, what is this guy like? What is this guy like? What is this guy like? And so we start tying all these knots. So say we're in college, right? Or, we're in our middle 20s, right? And we've had 25 sexual encounters, 30 sexual encounters, right? We got a bunch of knots, okay? They were hookups. They were exploitative soul ties. So when you have a soul tie, or when you engage in an exploitative, when you engage in exploitative sexual engagement with another person, you're not necessarily creating a soul tie with them. You're not like tying together. You're just tying a knot in yourself, right? So say you've had 25 hookups. Okay, you just have 25 knots in your energy being. You're all bound up, right? You're not necessarily tied to anybody. Because in an exploitative situation where both people are just exploiting each other for sex to feel good, just using each other for sex, people really aren't open. So they're not going to receive a lot of energetic impressions from the other person. They're just tying knots in their own energy. Because that energy generated has to go somewhere. And if it's exploitative energy, it's going to go back into your own energetic body. So you're carrying around this whole structure of knots. And so that's the first problem. You're just tying knots in your body if you're running around having all this, exploitative energetic sex, right, with people. The second problem is if you're doing that, you're going to end up in some pretty bizarre situations. You're going to end up in situations where you might be harming another person, or you might be harming a relationship, you might be breaking up a relationship, you might be in some type of engagement with a person that's like much older than you, you might be getting into some really bizarre, like abnormal, non-normative behaviors, like you're going to be doing weird stuff, okay? And you're tying knots, the other person's tying knots, and you're just going to be a big bundle of knots, okay? So maybe you got 25 knots. So somewhere along your journey of hooking up with people, you meet one person and you really like them. Okay, you really like them. You decide that you want to have a committed relationship attempt with this person. Okay, this is that other person, right? They got a bunch of knots too, because the energy body knows, like, this person here, they're not going to be attracted to this person here because their energy body is going to sense that it's all bound up in knots. right? So they're not going to have a committed relationship attempt with this person, or even an exploitative relationship with this person. They're not going to create a soul tie with them. Like, they're going to find somebody who's got 25 other little knots bound up. And what's going to happen is, and I can attest to this, there's 3 instances in my own personal history where I've tried to have committed relationship attempts, and the number of partners that each one of these people I had with was the same. It's crazy, right? So what's going to happen is these people are going to try to tie a knot together, because it's going to be a committed. They're going to open up. They're going to try. They're going to try to tie a knot together, and what's going to happen is it's going to be a big bundle of knots, right? And it's going to be a huge problem. It's going to be a huge disaster, because their 25 partners are going to mix with the other 25 partners, and they are going to imprint on each other, and there's going to be a huge energetic shift. It's going to be like 50 different partners, and they're carrying along all this exploitative energy from all those partners, and it's all bound, and it's going to be a disaster, man. It's going to be a lot of problems, and you're not going to know when that relationship dissolves, because it's going to dissolve. Right? It's just going to get worse and worse and worse. You're not going to know how to untie yourself from this mess. See, that's the problem with the soul ties. It's not necessarily like you're tied to like 30 different people, like 30 different strings all tied together. No, man, it's like you've been tying knots in yourself through generating your own types of exploitative energy. And then when you actually decide to engage in a committed relationship with another person, they're going to match you energetically, and you guys are going to tie that together, and it's going to be a big awful mess, right? So there's only 2 different types, and they're successive, and they compound on each other, and the exploitative energy that gets generated through exploitative soul ties in yourself works to undermine honest and sincere committed relationship attempts, right? So that's the problem with the soul ties. So how do we get rid of it? How do we get rid of them? How do we get rid of them? Well, there's no way you're going to untie this knot. Don't even try. don't try to like, I tried this, it doesn't work. Cut the cord. That's nonsense. Don't try to wait it out. It's energy. It has to go somewhere. It's going to be stored in your body until it's released, right? So I'm going to tell you how to do this. It's really simple. This is a new kind of concept, but it's because as we evolve collectively, as the collective conscious evolves, we learn all this new stuff. But it's all truth. So it's all rooted in truth. So the principles and mechanics that govern truth work. It's the same stuff. You don't need anything new. You just need the basics, right? So I'm going to give you 3 things right now. The video. This theoretical model that I've presented to you is a model that you can use to try to understand soul ties from this perspective, right? Of exploitative soul ties and committal soul ties. And exploitative soul ties it can happen on accident, it can be abuse, it can be intentional, right? And it can be done to you. So like kids shouldn't have sex. Adolescents shouldn't have sex, okay? And when they're exposed to any type of sexual content, that is abuse, right? So it is exploitative, and there is a huge energetic imprint from the abuser or the source of that content onto the child, because the child is in theta consciousness or a receptive state. So they absorb all of that stuff, all right? So 2 adults in exploitative relationships or an exploitative sexual exchange where they're just having sex for pleasure, they don't exchange a whole lot of energy onto the other people. They just generate a lot of negative energy within themselves, and they carry that on to the next partner. But with kids, totally different story. Abuse is totally not okay. I do not condone or approve or, none of that. That's not all right. But what I'm saying is we can do this all the time, right? On accident, like maybe in the high school, the high school kids, the relationship didn't work. Well, I'm going to go have sex with somebody else. Boom, he started the process of doing exploitative soul ties. So, I mean, it's so easy, right? So, like I was saying, you're not going to untie this. How do we get rid of this? Sorry, I lost my spot. What you got to do this theoretical model here for you to understand. You can do what I've called or made up to be called a sexual soul tie inventory. Where you go down your list, start at the beginning, and you look at every one of your partners, and you look at if it was committal or if it was exploitative, and you look at how it affected the next one and how it affected your behavior outside of that realm and all the other realms, and you see how they compound on themselves. You can do that. And it will, if you do that, you will see that they do compound on themselves and that one works to undermine the other one. You don't need to do a soul tie inventory. It might be helpful for you to do that, but you don't need to. What you do need to do is you need to go to the first soul tie that you formed or that was formed with you that was exploitative. You need to go to the first exploitative soul tie that happened in your life, and you need to look at that soul tie. You need to unpack it. You need to process it. You need to try to understand why it happened. You need to forgive the abuser or the other person involved in the soul tie. You need to forgive yourself, and you need to make amends. And that's how you heal your soul ties. And that's how you release that soul tie energy. And if you start with the first one, you might need to do a few different ones, depending on your own sexual, individual history. But if you do the first one, it's going to work. It's going to work to make all this go away. It's just going to work to make all this go away and replace that. Because you want to be in a committed, healthy, loving relationship with another person. And you don't want to be bound up by all these knots. And you don't want them to be bound up by all this knots. You want that energy to be released. So in order to do that, you have to forgive and you have to amend. And that's how it works. Those are principles taken straight from a 12-step program. Because it works, because it's rooted in truth. You don't need anything else other than that. You need to forgive and you need to amend. And that's it. And you need to look at the first one. Okay? So I think that's everything I wanted to get in the video. Thanks for sticking around. I cashed in, it's been like 3 weeks since I made a video. I cashed in my inspiration chips. I waited. I tried to generate as much energy as I possibly could to get a good video about this so it can be understood and it can help people out there. So hopefully it does. Until next time, Weird Wild Willie out.